Good afternoon. This is Julie Pavlik of Worldwide ERC, and thanks to everybody for standing by. Welcome to today's Worldwide ERC Learning Zone. I would like to take this opportunity to thank today's sponsors, CapRelo. Today's webinar is entitled, Creating a Successful International Relocation Policy. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping announcements. If you are experiencing technical difficulties joining this WebEx session, please dial 866-779-3239. Email questions may be sent to support@webex.com. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. If you have a question during the presentation, you may submit it online. To submit your questions, use the Q&A tab located in the lower right-hand portion of your screen. Simply click on the tab and type your question into the dialog box at the bottom of the screen, and then click the Send button. Please note that all written questions selected during this webinar will be answered publicly. Today's webinar is eligible for 1 CRP and 1 GMS credit. If you hold your CRP and or GMS designations and would like to receive credit for this Learning Zone webinar, you must utilize the recertification credit form, which is available on Worldwide ERC's website in the Certified Relocation Professional section under Education and Training. Now it is my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. David McPherson is Vice President, International Division at CapRelo. His role spans all aspects of international relocation, from global policy development to cultural support and settling in services, with a specialty in international logistics, operations, and customer service. He is active with Worldwide ERC and has been instrumental in the planning of our annual global symposium, as well as moderating and speaking at the same event. David is originally from Scotland. He has worked and lived in London, New York, Toronto, Chicago, and Washington. As an expatriate himself, with over 25 years' experience in international relocation, McPherson has a diverse and holistic view of the relocation industry. Joining David is Keila Schumard, Relocation Counselor at CapRelo. Keila has 16 years of experience in the relocation industry, administering full-service relocation benefits to diverse and well-established corporate clients and their relocating employees. Her primary responsibility at CapRelo involves managing and coordinating relocation services, including home sale programs, marketing assistance, home finding, household goods move management, and temporary living. In addition, she counsels clients on how to develop strategic solutions for their transferring employees. Keila has been awarded her CRP designation from the Worldwide ERC. I would like to welcome David and Keila, and I'll now hand the program over to them.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Just as Julie mentioned, I'm from Scotland, and so if anybody has any problems understanding me, Keila is not only going to help with a great presentation here, but she'll also do some interpretation work for anybody. Just send a question to us, and we'll have Keila interpret for me. Thanks for joining us. We just took a quick look at the attendee list and noticed that there are some people that are burning the midnight oil in places like India, apparently, and China. So welcome to you. I hope you're going to find the next 60 minutes well worth the time spent with us, and well worth it to earn your CRP credit. We're going to jump right into it now, and starting off, we wanted to just point out that this is a very, very broad and intricate topic when you come to looking at an international relocation policy, and there is no way in 60 minutes that Keila or I, or anybody for that matter, could do justice to going into a complete policy detail. So we're going to hopefully give everybody some building blocks, some tips, some interesting stories, and from there onwards, as you find that you're either reviewing policy or creating new policy, you will look to these tips and things we talk about today to help you. The business world changes rapidly. Old international policies are just not designed to meet all of today's complexities. The world is a changing place, as we know, and there's a lot of things have happened since you probably either dusted off your old policy or you started your policy. So to start with, we'd like to talk about why would you in fact need to update an international policy or create one. And how about considering these as the top 10 reasons?
and things that you'd most likely want to avoid for your transferees.
Absolutely. You definitely want to avoid this one. You never counted on having an employee stuck in the Moscow Transit Lounge for more than 30 days. That happens to be Tom Hanks, of course, you're looking at, not that other individual that's a little bit more infamous.
There are no suitable schools at the new assignment for your candidate's children.
That's a tough one. Don't take your kids if you're going to that post. Number 8, you find out your assignee's passport expired the day before they were supposed to leave. Or worse still, it ended up being packed in their moving shipment and they couldn't get to it, and so now they're stranded back home.
It's never a good thing. Number 7, the last-minute temporary housing you find for your assignee has more bed bugs than amenities. And we know that that can happen.
Absolutely. And number 6, I like this graphic. Your assignee's arrested after accidentally giving an illegal business gift in their new host country. Definitely not something you want to see on the news with one of your international assignees.
Number 5, there are no homes available that are big enough for your assignee's 5 children and 2 dogs.
So you better plan on shipping the minivan so that at least they've got something to sleep in while they're trying to get into their home somewhere. And number 4, wow, your reliable supplier who you were using for all of your U.S. government contracts was just bought by a foreign company, and now you're no longer in compliance with the government contracting needs.
Number 3, your assignee leaves the company because her family never gets to go home for visits. Definitely a need to visit Grandma and Grandpa. Absolutely.
Got to remember the family as a whole. And number 2, the assignment is put completely on hold because the assignee can't find someone to rent out their home back when they were in their origin country. You do not want them to be thinking about that over time. You know, their home is empty back home and who's looking after it.
And number 1, your assignee feels like he is losing money by taking the assignment. That's not what we want to have happen. Makes for a very unhappy transferee.
Yeah. Make sure that they know up front what they're going to be getting into, and make sure they know what their expenses and everything are, what they should be making, because that's what you need to make sure they're happy. So let's just delve into a little bit on the actual policies that are there, and let's talk a lot here about some of the things that you want to consider as you're building a policy for the company and a policy that works for the candidate pool and the employees that you're working with. It's obviously got to start out by fitting the business objectives of your corporation or your government agency. You have to make sure that the policy works for what the company wants, and that means you have to talk to a lot of different departments. You've got to include a lot of the C-level management in the company. You've got to talk to the business development side. You've obviously got to bring in payroll people, and a big part with international, which you tend not to need so much with domestic, is the legal side. There's going to be liabilities and there's going to be legal components to your policy that you don't have so much in the domestic field. The typical assignments that are there that we've seen over time, and this is not new or rocket science, but long-term assignments, and Sheila, you would say 3 to 5 years for those typically.
Mm-hmm.
You know, short-term assignments, which might be in the 1 to 2 year range, and maybe even less in some cases. Permanent transfers, where they may start out with one of these other types of assignment and then they are localized after they've been in country for a while. And then the one that perhaps is a little bit newer, but still has been around for 5 years or more, is the commuter/stealth assignments, where people are just going in and out. And those ones have to be watched very carefully because you sometimes can cross into legal problems and visa problems and tax problems if you don't manage those in part of your policy. Next.
So when you are considering what to offer in your relocation policies, either you're starting a new one or you're revising your old one, there are some things that you need to take into consideration. Not only you know, it seems very obvious, but finding the right candidate is very important. And we're not just talking the right candidate that has a good skill set for the job, but also someone that is going to work well in an international environment. Once you have the right candidate, you also have to make sure that their family are right for that new assignment and new location. Is it going to work for them? Because that's obviously very important so that the employee is happy and productive. You have to manage the ongoing assignment. Are you willing to commit to that assignment and that employee's needs? And is there the right support in place for that? And then, of course, most important to everybody is getting a good return on investment for your company. And this is something that obviously is very important, but what people don't realize is the cost of these programs is nothing compared to the success of that relocation. And when you're cutting the support to the employee and their family, it can reduce in the cost, but it's also going to probably result in an increased failure of that relocation, which is not a good return on investment for you, because then you're going to have to replace that employee, which adds additional costs.
Absolutely, and I think it's one of these areas where you can be penny wise and pound foolish, and you really do need to invest and stand up when a budget or a hiring manager says, I don't have enough funds to do this. Then they really need to look hard at whether they even should be doing it, because the cost of failure in an international relocation is probably 3 or 4 times the cost of a failure in a domestic relocation program. So we're going to go into some areas here, and one of the things we're going to look at is considerations, what you should be considering in your program. And we're going to start off with obviously the number one thing you should be considering is hiring the right person, and that comes into an area that you must have in your policy, and that's candidate assessment. It's very important to find the right candidate. There are lots of assessment tools that can help you to do this. You should look to those. Obviously, again, this is an area where there are certain things you can ask candidates and there are certain things you can't. When you're looking at that transferring employee and you think you've got the right candidate, you look at them and you say, yeah, he's got all the right skills. The line manager wants him. Does he have the right temperament to work in this new post? We thoroughly recommend going to your suppliers, and I mean all of your suppliers, the people that you work with for immigration, the people that you work with for travel, the people that the actual candidate and their family are probably going to be sharing a lot of time with. And as part of your assessment, getting some feedback from them as to, okay, we may be taking this person and sending them to India. Here, you talk to them about what they're going to need in the way of housing or in the way of visa and so on, and then come back to us and let us know. You'll get more feedback from some of your suppliers that have talked to your candidates than you can perhaps even ask them directly going through the interview process. And then the next part, which is critical, and again, some of this is obvious, but certainly worth underlining, and you have to make sure you just don't miss it, and that is, what are you going to do to make sure the trailing spouse and the dependents are going to be happy? Is the main employee doing the job going to have to spend much larger proportion of their time looking after family needs now that they've gone on an international assignment? Or are they going to be able to be as productive as you wanted them to be doing the job?
And that leads us into our next slide. And, you know, something that to consider is, can you imagine going into a new country, seeing it for the first time, and you're expected to live there for the next 3 to 5 years? That can be pretty stressful. You know nothing about it. You know nothing about the culture.
I must admit that was my experience. Julie mentioned that I was an expat starting out, and I was a young guy, newly married, getting a chance to go to Canada, and it was there was no look-see visit. There was no chance for me to go see. It was a case of, you want the job, get on the plane and do it. That worked out, but it doesn't always work out.
And we know that, you know, when that happens, yep, and the employee is not given an opportunity to go and look, either one of two things, you know, it either fails, mm-hmm, or they're not just as prepared for it, and they're not able to do the job and perform the way that you need them to do. Right. They may stick it out, but it may not just work for them. So one of the things that we feel is important, just as important as a home finding trip would be, and a lot of times they're used in addition to or instead of, but a fact-finding trip, letting the employee go over, working with someone locally who's going to show them around, show them what housing is like, maybe visiting schools, taking some time to let their children have school appointments, make sure it's something that's going to work for them, and just kind of getting everybody involved in that upfront piece so that they feel more comfortable in accepting a position that's going to completely uproot their lives. And right, not only does it allow the employee to get an idea of what their needs are going to be, if we know what the employee's needs are going to be, it's also going to allow you to know what the costs involved are going to be for that employee. And if it's a higher cost for that particular employee versus maybe another one that, you know, you may be moving internally in Europe, yep, versus bringing them from Brazil, right, you may not want to invest that kind of money into it if they're going to have more needs and they're, you know, not the right candidate for an international.
And one of the things that we were talking about earlier was a lot of companies today are seeing a very diverse workforce in their companies, you know, here in the U.S., in Europe, and in other countries where, you know, global relocation is happening. And it's very important to not forget that just because, I'll give myself as an example, just because I'm British doesn't mean you can send me and my family back to Scotland. And the same applies, that just because you have somebody who's done extremely well in the company who's originally from China or from India or from Brazil doesn't automatically mean that you can just say, oh, I don't need to send them on a pre-assessment trip, let them take a look at the country. They know it, they know the language, blah, blah, blah. No, you really got to take a step back and say, yes, but their 3 children were born in America. Or, you know, how are they going to adjust? And that's going to disrupt things if you don't pay attention to those other aspects of it.
Absolutely. So it's better to know that up front than, yep, to spend the money and find it out later on.
Right. Absolutely. Thanks. So moving on with our checklist here, this is another cornerstone that you have to make sure you're covered. You got to assess whether or not the person and the family are going to be able to immigrate. Now, maybe not a full immigration process. You may be just looking for a work visa to get them in. But immigration assessment and then immigration assistance throughout their relocation is vital. You are now getting into the legal side of relocation. You are now dealing with a foreign government. We're here in Northern Virginia, the D.C. area. A lot of news about that right now, but at least we're close to all of the major embassies for every country in the world, and so we do have access to those, which perhaps in other parts of the world and in other parts of the U.S. you don't. But it's very important that you get this right so that both the employee can work and that there's no problem with the family getting in. And if, in fact, there's a situation where you have you want both spouses to work, this is the time to get that cleared up. And you figure out what type of career the trailing spouse can have along with the principal. And when it goes wrong, and I think Keela's got a little story about one that went wrong recently, it can be very expensive, right?
Absolutely. You know, you have an employee that needs to renew their visa, and they weren't prepared. Nobody was tracking it, and they needed to leave the country for a period of time, which means incurring costs for the company for them to do that, and then be able to come back once everything's where it needs to be.
Yeah, and that's not, I'm sure a number of people on the phone today will have gone through that and experienced that, and it's really quite embarrassing to have to have your employee fly to another country to get visas redone and then come back in to be able to continue to do their job. So right now there is a problem on visas for coming to the U.S. Because of the shutdown at the moment. It's something that is going to put some people that are coming in on hold before they can actually come into the U.S. and start their work. Next.
So now that we have their immigration piece in hand, the next piece is the temporary housing, and you know, it varies greatly around the world. It's not the same everywhere. It's not the corporate apartment that we might be used to in the U.S. And this is the very first living experience that an employee and their family typically have. And we all know that each relocation is different, each family is different, their needs are different. Things that people consider, location, to schools, to work, something that you have to make sure that you're considering is safety. Is it in a secured location, depending upon what part of the country you're in? And so these are the types of things that you have to make sure that you're getting set up in your policy so that the family has an opportunity to transition while their household goods are being delivered, while they're trying to find permanent housing. It is not intended to be a permanent residence, and that's something that a lot of transferees have a hard time when it's not what their idea of housing is. Yeah. They have a hard time remembering it is a temporary solution until they get settled.
And this is one area, Keila, where you are maybe at a disadvantage if you're corporate, because a lot of times these transferees know more because they are expats themselves. They've lived the overseas life. And this is an area where you have to be careful and watch controls, because you are trying to keep things within budgets.
Absolutely.
And you know, in this area, they arrive in their new country. They're probably going into a hotel for a few days before going into phase 2, which is the temp living, before going into their permanent living. And I think you had a good point, Keila, about some clients recently that have opted to go straight from phase 1 of getting there in a hotel and going straight into the permanent living because of solutions that you worked on.
Yeah, we're finding that sometimes if a transferee is allowed to go on a trip ahead of time, or maybe they're there traveling for business until the family arrives, we're finding that finding the permanent house and then putting rental furniture in it until their family arrives or until their household goods arrive, and they're able to then start establishing their routines and being comfortable in their own home. And it tends to be a less cost-effective, you know, a less costly option.
Yeah, and it's another phase cut out of the move. They don't have to move from one hotel to one apartment to another place. And if they have children with the family, they can start to get, accustomed to the neighborhood and to the other kids and so on. And while they may be camping with the rental furniture, and it may not be quite the color scheme that they wanted, it's a better solution for everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Next. I don't know if you've noticed any trend in what we're doing here, but Keila decided that I should have to do all the cultural and immigration and foreign stuff and language training, which I'm afraid I'm not going to be very helpful with, because I say I speak Scottish, Canadian, Australian, American, and English. So ask me a question in any of those,
American's
and I'm good.
A language?
I think it is. So anyway, cross-cultural and language training, we've got that down as one of the foundation stones of an international policy. Not one. Some people would argue you do need to have it in a domestic policy for some parts of the country, but not one that you typically have in a domestic program, but a very important one for the international one. This picture here relates back to this is the only reference I'm going to make to a publication, but there is a book out there called Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands. And it's a nice, fairly easy read, and it does address some of the etiquette for both business and social life in different cultures around the world. And I recommend you might care to put that in your library for your company if you care to. But it is important to start the cross-cultural and certainly the language. You want to, if you're going to need to have language for business transactions, you need to start that early. And sometimes that can be even crucial for the candidate that you're picking. So you must make sure you've got this in your policy. You want to do it before, and you want to do it when they arrive. You want to keep doing it, and you also want to extend it to the family. It's
Absolutely.
Not one. If you just do it for the employee and just let the family flounder on their own, it's going to hurt things. It's really important to try and have that. It could be a Portuguese or Spanish or French tutor that will come and work with the kids or the rest of the family while they're on site.
And I'm finding that in some countries, you're required to have a level 1 understanding of the language in order to complete the visa process. So,
right. What was that? You recently had that? Was it
Germany?
Germany.
I found that out. So yeah. So now the family is been selected. They're ready to go. The next step that you need to make sure that you have in place adequate support in destination is the home finding and settling in services. And so many times people are left to their own accord to go out, find housing, find their lease, go find their own grocery store, things like that. And this is something that is very stressful. It could seem very simple in a person's home country. Where do they shop? Where do they go to the bank? But when you're going to a new country, trying to figure all of that out, trying to figure out the transportation system, it can be pretty daunting for someone, and definitely for the family and the children. And so you want to make sure that you have adequate support in place to assist the transferee. Housing needs can be completely different, similar to temporary housing. Housing needs can be different. We know, if you look at, international home finding TV shows on HGTV, you see how we're so used to houses being a certain size and refrigerators being a certain size, and it's not always like that in another country. And so these are the types of things that you can begin educating the employee on before they arrive, of course.
And can I add just on that? Can I add two things? One, a personal embarrassment of myself arriving in Canada. And, after you get into the swing of things, I found myself on at least 3 or 4 occasions coming out of a business meeting, walking to my car, opening the car door, climbing in, looking in front of me and saying, "Where the heck's the steering wheel?" I was still back in the UK driving my car on the other side of the road, and I would sheepishly look around and climb out and go back around and get in the right side of the car. So that's the sort of thing that will happen. The other thing is, and we were talking about this earlier, with the downturn in the housing market in the US over the last few years, we are seeing a slight shift towards people going on overseas assignments that are actually quite interested in buying property. And again, that TV show that we referred to is one where you see that all the time, but we're actually seeing it in real life with some of our clients, because let's face it, they haven't made a penny on their house in the last 8 years in the US, and they're looking to see if maybe an investment in an overseas property where they're going might be better for them. There's not very many international policies out there right now that have anything that addresses that, and it's a question that needs to be covered.
Absolutely, absolutely. Part of the settling in services is not only important for the family, but it's also something that's important for the spouse. You want to make sure that that spouse is involved in networking, maybe groups that involve other expat spouses, volunteering, things like that. You want your employees to focus on the job and focus on getting that done. You don't want to have to worry about the wife or husband being upset, being home alone and bored, right, with nothing to do, because they've uprooted their entire life, everybody that they've known. So that is something that's very important. It will also help minimize the stress to the employees. And another thing, as a female, something very important, where do you get your hair cut?
This doesn't apply to me, Keela. It's only for you. Well. You think I got this gray hair just from being in the relocation industry?
You know, so your on the ground people will help them with this type of thing to ease into a better routine, to make it a lot easier.
Definitely. And the other thing with settling in, and again, it's a little bit of cultural as well, is, you know, there may be an awful lot more business done on a social level in international assignments. And there may be a lot more entertaining done at the employee's home. So again, that speaks to how you consider housing allowances and what, in fact, they need to have in that country if they're going to be successful on their assignment.
Absolutely.
Next. So now we come to the household goods removals for all of my foreign friends that are on the phone, for Americans and Canadians, the moving and storage industry. The day finally comes, you have to move their assignee and family to a new house. Do you trust your move to anyone? This is definitely an area where things can go wrong. And there are an awful lot of brokers out there online. I love this graphic, don't you? This company looks like there's certainly no shortage of manpower. They're going to send as many packers as they need to get that house taken care of. And by the looks of it, they certainly know how to get a lot of volume and weight onto a truck.
How do you weigh for that? Like, how do you?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how you get scale tickets or volume measurements on that shipment. But, you know, here's the reality. There are some really great looking websites of internet brokers that are purporting to be full-fledged international household goods moving transportation companies. But it really is a buyer beware market. And in the international side, I mean, actually, here, we were again talking earlier. You know, in a domestic move, let's face it, if you really wanted to stay on top of it, you could pack up the kids, put them in the car, and drive behind the moving van from one side of the country to the other. You can't do that with an international assignment. You are relying on companies that will themselves be relying and buying services from airlines and steamship lines and other companies. So this is an area where we touched on talking about lump sums, and we decided we wouldn't get into lump sums too much in this webinar. But this is an area where you really don't want to just give the employee money and let them do it themselves. Wouldn't you say, Keela?
Yeah, definitely. Trying to have the employee figure out the customs process and meeting, you know, the customs people at port and trying to get all of that paperwork worked out and filed is not something that you want your employee to be spending time doing. Leave that to the suppliers to do.
It's a bit cliched, but this is definitely an area where you do need the professionals. And if an employee does want to do their own thing because they have family and friends that are in Morocco or Turkey or wherever, just make sure they understand they're not getting time off work to go take care of customs clearance and unpacking. This is not what they're saving money on.
So now the employees all moved in, everybody started their routines and ready to kind of start their life in the new country. And you want to make sure that you have some ongoing support for them, whether that's allowing them to return home to visit the family, something that we think that's a pretty important piece of an international assignment being successful. You just want to make sure that they're able to visit grandma and grandpa and their aunts and uncles and friends and things. But as far as the employee, you also want to make sure that they feel connected to the home office, not feeling like they've been kind of sent away and forgotten about.
Absolutely.
And ways to kind of do that is to have mentoring programs. Have someone that is either in the home office that keeps them in the loop, brings them in for training, continued training, and then also people that are in the new country where they may have gone through the same thing. They may be someone that's relocated internationally, and so they can be their support and kind of their cheering section and providing them with network opportunities that they can participate in the new area. So, that ongoing support is something that people forget to do, but it is very vital to making sure that the employee remains happy.
One thing that we came across recently with a client, which hadn't really occurred to us and perhaps has to you, but is a fairly new one. I think everybody's fairly familiar with the ability to use Skype or Google Voice or video to stay in touch with family and friends back home. But, we were in a situation where people were saying, well, I don't even have a landline anymore. I just have a cell phone mobile number. Is there any way I can just keep that number and then, my family, friends, or whatever can just call that? Well, yeah, there is, and there's a way to do that using voice over internet. And think how great that is for teenage children, that they can stay in touch with their friends. And, of course, the advantage is it is voice over internet, so you're not paying horrendous cell phone call charges for being overseas if you try to keep the cell phones working. And it is a really novel and neat way to be able to stay in touch.
And here is a service that some people also tend to overlook on a relocation, on an international assignment, or when they're repatriating someone back. We tend to focus on the needs of the destination versus what's going to happen with the employee's home that they're leaving. Maybe it's a new assignment and they have a home that they own that they do not want to sell because they're going to be on an assignment for only a couple of years and they plan on coming back. That's something that's important to them, and you definitely don't want them to be focused on what's going on with the home. And we want to make sure that there are services that are available to the employee to make sure that they can dispose of that home. The same thing when the employee is repatriating, either going back home or going to a new assignment. You want to make sure that they're leaving things the way that they need to be left, making sure that the details with closing up a lease is completed correctly, scheduling inspections to make sure that all repairs and cleaning is handled. Maybe the company signed the lease for them and paid the security deposit. So you want to make sure that you're working with someone that can assist the employee with that process. They're already thinking about where they're going back home to or going to a new location. So those details and helping the employee out with those details can make it a smoother transition for them and make it a lot less stressful.
And a lot of times this part of the whole lease, if they are renting, is something that it turns out being quite flexible. You sometimes have to terminate leases early, and you sometimes have to extend them for 30 days or more, just based on either the project or how fast the family can move. So again, you don't want to be locked into something where you lose money in terms of a deposit and you don't get your refund. And the other thing that we were, again, talking about was, you know, everybody from time to time signs up for the gym membership, usually straight after New Year's Day. But think of anything like that that is sitting on the corporate credit card that they have left Tokyo, they're now back in their new position in Europe or whatever, and month after month it's still hitting the card and nobody's staying on top of it. So taking care of utility accounts and memberships, you do need to have these reminders in place. Which brings us at this stage to the last item, last foundation stone item, last item on our checklist, which of course is one of the most important. It is to the company and it is to the employee. Show me the money. It's probably going through the employee's mind and the candidate's mind right from the first time they apply for the job. What is it that's going to be in it for them? At the same time, for the contract manager that's hiring the candidate, they're trying to manage to a budget, to an ROI, and they're expecting you, when you're controlling these assignees, to manage to it as well. So it's very, very important, and it has to be tracked very carefully. It is. I'm going to again refer to the American situation as one of the more unique ones in the world, because every American citizen does have to file taxes back in the U.S., as well as file taxes in the UK or Japan or Brazil, wherever they are. That doesn't apply to most other countries, but it is a part of being a U.S. citizen. And it does add to the cost, because now you're doing 2 filings, so now you need a firm to support you on this. Keela and I are not going to try and answer any detailed questions as it regards tax and expenses. We have a lot of other fine folks in our team at Cap Relo that can help with that. You know, we'd be happy to any questions that come up on that. You will be receiving answers outside of the webinar. But that pretty much covers, when you say, Keela, that's the 10 most important basics of what you need.
Absolutely. Those are kind of the 10 areas that you have to consider when you're putting your policy together and you're trying to figure out the best way to assist your employees with getting acclimated, getting situated, and at the same time maximizing your return on investment. Because happy employee equals production and a good return on investment.
Absolutely. And we didn't put these 10 foundation stones, we didn't put them in any specific order. And like we said at the outset, each one of these 10 could become more than a 60-minute webinar in itself. You just don't want to miss any, because they are all interconnected. And we want you to think about that, whether you're just doing a check-off of what your current policy is and updating it. And if you're getting into creating a new policy, we obviously think these are the 10 areas that you need to check off. And I think everybody on this call should have received from ERC this presentation. It should have come over just prior to the call. So please feel free to work with the checklist that we've given you and use that in your own organizations. I think we're going to turn it back to Julie.
Absolutely.
You with us, Julie?
I am indeed here. Thanks, David and Keela. That was a great presentation. But we're going to take the last little bit of time we have here together to open it up for some questions. So if you would like to ask the panelists a question, you just need to type it in the Q&A box located in the lower right-hand side of your screen. And actually, I think I've seen a couple of questions already started coming in, and they have been for a while. So I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm going to hand it back over to you. So go ahead and start the Q&A.
All right, we've got several questions that have come in here. One of the first ones that we have is actually how far in advance, David and Keila, should somebody typically apply for a visa or work permit for employees outside of the U.S.? Is there any standard there?
It really depends upon the country. It depends upon if it's something that's like within Germany. Obviously, you're not going to need as much time to prepare, but it's all based on the country and the type of visa that you're needing.
Okay, great. I see a question from Lynn regarding credit. Very good question, and one that is a troubling one for most assignees. Oh yeah, I'll read the question, sorry. For international relocation to the U.S., what do you suggest are the best ways to build credit in the U.S., where credit means everything from being able to purchase a cell phone or get credit cards and so on? Yeah, it's one of the things that you should start very early, and oftentimes there's the main employee gets to the new job before the rest of the family. They should and you should help them do a credit application and get things started as soon as they come in, maybe even on an early business trip. That way they are starting to build credit, because if I'm not wrong, I think it's at least 6 months that you have to have credit, and you really don't want them to be using their Barclay card back in Europe and having to convert all of their expenses to pounds or euros during that period. So put that one pretty high on the list of getting a credit application for something. If you know they're going to be leasing a car, do the car lease early on, because that helps them get their credit rating started early in the U.S. I found even moving from Canada to the U.S. that I thought, hey, this is not going to be a problem, but it was. I couldn't get a U.S. credit card until I'd been here 6 months.
Okay, thank you, David. Another question we had up there is, it says, I may have missed it, but was there a recommendation on whether to allow home purchase in a host country? I think we have talked a little bit about, the fact that some people are now doing that, so I don't know that there was a recommendation.
No, I don't think there's a recommendation on that. I think it's just something, I won't call it the flavor of the month, but I think that because of what's been going on in the U.S. housing market more specifically, it is something that candidates or employees are sort of considering. But that's really why we were talking about it. I think it really will be a case-by-case situation where you actually allow somebody to get into investing their funds or company funds on buying property.
All right, thank you. Another question that we had came in. It says that since English is the language of business, why bother to provide a language class as part of the benefit, since everyone speaks it anywhere?
I'm not a good one to answer that. I only speak English. But Keila, you take that.
Well, I mean, if it's a difference of you and your competitor knowing the local language, then I would say that's an important business decision. As far as socially, in a lot of cultures, it's rude not to know the local language, at least on an understanding level, so that you can, the basics of speaking, getting through your day.
Absolutely. I mean, I will, to my extent of language, just recognizing the language, and I'll give you an example. Doing business at the Canadian Embassy, you know that Canada is made up of Anglophones and Francophones. Quebec and the Canadian government, the federal government, you're going to always find a mixture of French and English there. So you just don't know who, when you talk to them on the phone or when you meet them, what you're dealing with. So just being able to at least say bonjour, au revoir, and recognize, acknowledge their language, even though you don't speak another word of it, that's the kind of respect that, that goes a long way for you when you do that.
One of our people, it's less of a question, but I think it's an important part, and I think David and Keila, you touched on it earlier, is make sure individuals are aware to contact their tax advisor regarding all tax issues. And I think that's an important case, and I think with a third-party relocation company, you've got your tax experts on board, so, make sure that they are the ones dealing with the tax issues, which is really why we didn't go into it here. It's very complex country to country, and I think you really need to work with your experts on that. Another question that we had come in, the person asking the question said, we have problems with transferees using their home leave benefits as extra vacation. Is there a way to prevent this?
I mean, basically that's a policy guideline. You know, you want to make sure that your policy defines that the return is to the home country. It's not to the south of France.
Yeah, you do see that coming up. People say, do you mind if I'm allowed to travel business class or economy, and do you mind if I travel from South Africa via Rome back to Toronto? And by the way, I've got a 4-day layover in Rome, and the company's picking it up. That's the sort of thing, like I was mentioning earlier, that some of these people, these lovely people that are expats, know more about their world than you might do in corporate. So you want to kind of keep this pretty tight, and the days off and so on, you want to try and tie it to what you have at home in your home country, bearing in mind that there are other holidays where the offices will be closed in different countries. And so you can lose some productivity just in hours of work because of the country that they're in, and then also some of these home leave or business trip and things that come up.
All right. Another thing, somebody had asked David if you could repeat the name of the book that you had mentioned about culture. Bow.
Yeah, it's Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands is the book. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give Julie I don't remember the author offhand, but after this I'll give it to Julie, and she can share it with the attendees that would like it. Someone's asking for a copy of this PowerPoint, and you should have it. It should, if you were registered, it was sent out at 1:45 Eastern Standard Time to all attendees. So you should already have it in your inbox. If it's not there, just check your spam folder. I think it should be with you, and you can go back to Julie afterwards, and she'll definitely provide it. We have passed it over. It doesn't have all the graphics in it. I'll point that out. Does it, Jim? Is it more?
No, it doesn't have quite all the same graphics that you saw, but it has all the same content.
Oh, there's somebody helping us out there. Thanks, Jill. She's given us Amazon.com, Shake Hands, best-selling business countries. That's the book, and it's, of course, available on Amazon.com.
There we go. And then we had another question come in. With the cost of shipping household goods, and it is very expensive to do that, what's really the guideline for whether you rent or buy furniture? I mean, 12 months or less or longer, is there a real guideline there?
I mean, from what I've seen, it kind of depends upon the country. There might be some countries where it's normal and customary for if you're going to be on an assignment for a year, that you're going to be renting something that is furnished. So again, I think where your employee is going to be relocating is how you would make that call.
Yeah. And again, cost-wise, the type of country, a hardship post, maybe an engineering situation like in the Middle East or in some parts of Africa where you don't really take a full household of European or American furnishings and so on. You're going to design your allowances for shipping of goods. Our advice is that it's important to have some things around them from home. So even if they're in smaller accommodation, you may dial things back a little bit and put more authorization onto leaving goods in storage at home, but still have maybe an air freight move, something over and above what they would take with them as excess baggage. And that way, they're going to have that connection to home to tide them through.
I just saw another note, again, with the PowerPoint. I'll just go back to that. Somebody said the link to the PowerPoint is not working. So, WERC will make sure that they get it posted. It'll be up on their site. as will the recording of this event. So it'll definitely happen, and I can tell you that not tomorrow, but a few days down the line, Caprilo will also make sure that they have the PowerPoint up on our own site. So it will be available, if not immediately from WDRC, shortly from Caprilo also.
I think one of the last things that we wanted to mention is this webinar today is just happening 2 weeks before the Global Symposium, which is in Dallas in a couple of weeks, and we hope that many of you on the call are going to be attending, and we hope that many of you might stop by and say hi to Keela at the Caprilo booth. And we'll have a number of other people from our operations and executive team there that can help you with any questions you might have related to this or anything else.
All right, Julie, that looks like really the last of the questions that have come up.
If we haven't got to your specific question, it's because we're probably not comfortable enough as experts on that particular item. We'll get you an answer, but it will be offline after the call.
Absolutely, we've got plenty of experts in this company who just don't happen to be in the room today, who can answer a lot of questions, and we're more than happy to help you out going forward if you do have some questions about that kind of thing.
Yes, thank you very much, guys. This is Julie. I did want to mention that I think there was an error with the link that went out. There was another email going out today at 5 p.m., and it'll be from the exact same email address, which is messenger@webex.com. I will correct that link and resend these handouts, so you will have them in your mailbox this afternoon at 5 p.m. Eastern. So, but with that said, I, again, want to take the opportunity to thank David and Keela for sharing their insights with us. I thought that was a great webinar, lots of great information, and also lots of great questions. So on behalf of the Worldwide ERC, I hope you enjoyed the webinar. Thanks again to Caprilo. And at this point, we may now disconnect. Thank you, everybody, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.